The Duke sent her away for her own good. She came back engaged to his enemy. The candles had burned down to stubs. Lady Eliza Thorne would notice this with the part of her mind that never stopped cataloguing the small details of Ashworth Park, which rooms needed fresh flowers, which servants were looking peaked and might need lighter duties, which of the ancient windows had begun to let in draughts that would worsen with winter's approach. The candles in the library had perhaps an hour left in them, and she should ring for replacements. She did not ring. To do so would require moving from the chair she had claimed hours ago, and moving would disturb the peculiar peace that had settled over the room like the first snow of the season. Across the vast mahogany desk, Sebastian Vane, the Duke of Ashworth, continued working through his correspondence with the focused intensity he brought to everything. His quill moved in sharp, decisive strokes. Occasionally he paused to consult a ledger or reference a previous letter, and in those moments Eliza allowed herself to study him. 3 years she had lived in this house. 3 years of careful observation had taught her to read the subtle variations in his granite facade. Tonight his shoulders carried more tension than usual, held rigid beneath the fine wool of his coat. A muscle twitched at the corner of his jaw with metronomic regularity. Whatever news those letters contained, it was not welcome. She returned her attention to her own work, a list of provisions needed for the upcoming quarter, compiled with the assistance of Mrs. Aldridge, the housekeeper. The figures blurred slightly as her eyes grew heavy. The fire had burned low, casting the room in shades of amber and shadow, and the silence had taken on a texture like velvet, soft and encompassing. "You should retire." His voice, low and rough from hours of disuse, startled her more than it should have. Eliza straightened in her chair and found him watching her, his quill suspended over the page. "I'm perfectly well, Your Grace." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her practical grey gown. One of 3 she rotated through with careful maintenance to extend their wear. "I wanted to finish the provision list so you might review it tomorrow." "The provision list will keep until morning." He set down his quill with a deliberate motion. "You've been yawning for the past half hour." Had she? Eliza felt heat climb her cheeks. She prided herself on her composure, on the seamless competence that had made her indispensable to this household. To be caught in such an obvious display of fatigue felt like a failure. "I apologize, Your Grace. I hadn't realized. I am not scolding you." Something flickered across his features, too quickly to name. Frustration, perhaps, or something gentler that he would never allow himself to show. "I am merely suggesting that exhausting yourself serves no one. Least of all Lily, who will expect her usual morning lessons regardless of how late you sat up pretending to work." The mention of his niece softened something in Eliza's chest. Lily Vane was 8 years old, orphaned 3 years ago when her parents, the Duke's younger brother and his wife, perished in a carriage accident on an icy road. She had come to Ashworth Park a silent, grieving waif, and Eliza had been hired as her companion within the month. What the Duke had not anticipated, when he engaged a gentleman's daughter fallen on hard times to tend his traumatized niece, was that Eliza would become the axis around which the entire household turned. Somehow, in the space of 3 years, she had evolved from companion to governess to unofficial chatelaine, managing everything from Lily's education to the menu planning to the delicate negotiations required when Sebastian's mother, the Dowager Duchess, descended for her quarterly visits. No one had asked her to take on these duties. She had simply seen what needed doing and done it, because that was who she was. That was all she knew how to be. "Lily is quite put out with me at the moment," Eliza said, gathering her papers into a neat stack. "I informed her that young ladies do not keep frogs in their pockets, and she accused me of being a tyrant." The corner of his mouth twitched. On any other man, it might have been a smile. "A tyrant, strong words from a child who cannot yet properly conjugate Latin verbs. In her defence, the frog was quite small, and apparently very friendly. She named him Bartholomew. Of course she did. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture Eliza had learned to recognize as suppressed amusement. I trust Bartholomew has been returned to more appropriate accommodations. He has taken up residence in the garden pond. Lily visits him twice daily to ensure he has not been eaten by the herons. Eliza rose from her chair, smoothing her skirts. She takes her responsibilities quite seriously. She learned from the best. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning he probably had not intended. Eliza felt the colour rise in her cheeks again and busied herself with stacking her papers, gathering her shawl, performing the small rituals of departure that had become so familiar over 3 years of nights like this. Because this was the secret they never acknowledged, the pattern they had fallen into with the inevitability of water finding its level. These late evenings in the library, working in companionable silence, existing together in a space that belonged to neither the formal daylight hours nor the complete isolation of sleep. Here, in the amber glow of dying candles, they were simply Sebastian and Eliza, not that either would ever dare speak such a thought aloud. "Good night, Your Grace." She dropped a small curtsy, clutching her papers to her chest. "Miss Thornwood." He had turned back to his correspondence, but she could feel his attention following her as she moved toward the door. Just before she reached it, his voice stopped her. "The provision list, leave it on my desk. I will review it tonight." "You should rest as well, Your Grace." The words escaped before she could catch them. Too familiar, too concerned, too much like a wife speaking to a husband rather than an employee addressing her master. But he only made a sound that might have been acknowledgement or dismissal, and Eliza slipped from the room, with her heart beating faster than it should. The corridors of Ashworth Park stretched before her, cold and silent at this hour. The staff had long since retired to their quarters, and only the night footman remained on duty, drowsing in his chair by the main entrance. Eliza moved through the darkness with the ease of long familiarity, her slippered feet finding the path without conscious thought. Her room was in the east wing, had been moved there 6 months ago, when Lily began having nightmares and needed someone nearby. The nursery occupied the floor above, and the connecting stair meant Eliza could reach her charge in moments when the night terrors struck. That this also placed her in the Duke's own wing, on the floor directly below his private chambers, was a coincidence no one mentioned. The room itself was modest but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a writing desk, and a window that overlooked the rose garden. Eliza's few possessions, a miniature of her mother, a worn volume of poetry, a carved wooden box containing letters she could not bring herself to throw away, occupied the small shelf beside the bed. Everything she owned could be packed in a single trunk within an hour, a reality she tried not to think about. She prepared for sleep with economical movements, brushing out her honey-colored hair, washing her face with cold water from the basin, changing into a nightgown that had been mended so many times the original fabric was more memory than presence. Through the window, moonlight painted the gardens silver, and somewhere in the darkness an owl called to its mate. Sleep should have come easily. Her body ached with fatigue, and the bed, while narrow, was warm and clean. But Eliza lay awake long after the candle guttered, staring at shadows on the ceiling and trying not to think about the way he had said she learned from the best, or the weight of his gaze following her from the room, or the 1,000 small moments that had accumulated over 3 years like snowdrifts against a wall. She was being foolish. She knew she was being foolish. The Duke of Ashworth was not for the likes of her, an impoverished earl's daughter with a disgraced father, and nothing to recommend her, but a talent for making herself useful. He had been married once, to a diamond of the first water, a beauty of impeccable breeding and substantial fortune. Lady Caroline Vane had died 5 years ago, and the Duke had made it abundantly clear that he had no intention of ever remarrying. What Eliza felt, what she had felt for longer than she cared to admit, was irrelevant. A private weakness to be managed, like a recurring headache or a tendency toward melancholy in winter. She would not indulge it. She would not allow it to compromise her position or endanger the security she had so carefully built. But sometimes, in the quiet dark of her narrow room, she allowed herself to wonder what it would feel like to be loved by Sebastian Vane, to be the object of all that fierce intensity, all that carefully banked passion, to be held by those strong arms and told that she was wanted not for her competence or her usefulness, but simply for herself. It was a dangerous fantasy. Eliza pushed it away and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come. Morning arrived with the pale grey light of an English autumn and the distant clatter of servants beginning their work. Eliza rose before the first housemaid could come to stir her fire, dressing herself in the dark with practised efficiency. Today's gown was brown, slightly better than the grey, with a cream fichu that softened its severity. She checked her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand and found what she always found: a face that was pleasant without being pretty, features that were regular without being remarkable. Her eyes were her best feature, warm brown with flecks of gold that caught the light, but they were often shadowed with the fatigue of long hours and longer responsibilities. Her hair resisted every attempt at fashionable styling, escaping its pins to curl in wisps around her face, no matter how firmly she disciplined it. Useful, she thought, with a twist of humour that held no real bitterness. I look exactly like what I am, a woman who is useful. Lily was already awake when Eliza arrived at the nursery, sitting cross-legged on her bed, with a book of botanical illustrations open on her lap. At 8 she was small for her age, but fierce in her opinions, with her uncle's dark hair and her late mother's blue eyes. Those eyes lit up when Eliza entered, though her expression remained carefully neutral. "I am still angry with you about Bartholomew," she announced. "Good morning to you as well, Lady Lily." Eliza moved to open the curtains, letting in the watery sunshine. "I trust you slept well despite your fury." "Tolerably." Lily traced a finger over the illustration of a lily, her namesake flower, which she claimed to find boring compared to more exotic specimens. "I dreamed about frogs, hundreds of them. They were all named Bartholomew, and they lived in my pocket forever and ever." "That sounds rather crowded." Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself this small informality before the day's lessons began. "However do you imagine they would all fit?" "Magic pockets, obviously." Lily closed the book with a snap and fixed Eliza with a searching look that was disconcertingly adult. "Why did you come to my room last night?" Eliza blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Last night? I heard your door close very late, and this morning Mary said she found your candle burned all the way down. You were in the library again, weren't you, with Uncle Sebastian?" The use of his Christian name was a liberty only Lily was permitted to take. Eliza felt her cheeks warm and cursed the transparency of her complexion. "His Grace had correspondence to review. I was completing the household accounts." "You do that every week?" Lily's eyes narrowed. "You never stay so late unless you're helping him with something important." "The quarterly provision list is extremely important. Without proper planning, we might run out of tea, and then where would we be?" "You're deflecting." Another adult word, learned from listening to conversations she shouldn't have overheard. "That's what Uncle Sebastian does when he doesn't want to answer questions." Eliza sighed. The child was too perceptive by half. It was one of the things she loved most about her, and one of the things that made her most exhausting to manage. "What is it you actually want to know, Lily?" The girl was quiet for a moment, picking at a loose thread on her counterpane. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than before. "Are you going to leave?" The question struck Eliza like a blow. "Whatever would make you ask such a thing? Everyone leaves." Lily's chin trembled, though her eyes remained dry with the fierce control she had learned from her uncle. "Mamma and Papa left. Miss Hartley left." The previous governess, who had lasted all of 3 months before declaring Lily unmanageable. "Even grandmother leaves, every time she visits. She says she's going to stay longer, but she never does." Eliza gathered the child into her arms without conscious thought, holding her close against the morning chill. Lily resisted for only a moment before melting into the embrace, her thin shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. "I am not going anywhere," Eliza said firmly. "I am exactly where I wish to be." "Promise?" "I promise." It was a foolish promise to make Eliza knew that even as the words left her mouth. She was an employee, dependent on the Duke's continued goodwill for her position. One wrong step, one breach of propriety, one shift in household politics, and she could find herself dismissed with nothing but a character reference and her meagre savings. But looking down at Lily's dark head, feeling the child's arms wrapped around her waist with desperate strength, Eliza could not bring herself to be sensible. Some promises mattered more than prudence. "Now then." She eased back, tucking a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "Shall we discuss what happened to your French conjugations yesterday, or shall I assume the dog ate them?" "We don't have a dog." "A glaring oversight that I believe you have mentioned to your uncle approximately 100 times. 117. Lily's smile was watery, but genuine. "He says dogs are too much trouble. I told him he only says that because he's never met the right dog." "And what did he say to that?" "He made that face he makes when he's trying not to. Laugh! You know the one." Eliza did know. She knew it intimately, had catalogued every variation of Sebastian Vane's carefully controlled expressions over 3 years of close observation. The almost smile, the suppressed laugh, the flicker of warmth that appeared when he thought no one was watching. "Well," she said briskly, pushing away thoughts that had no place in a nursery, "perhaps if your French improves sufficiently, we might revisit the dog discussion. Shall we begin?" The morning passed in its usual rhythm of lessons and small negotiations. Lily was bright, but easily distracted, her mind darting from topic to topic, like a butterfly in a garden. Eliza had learned to channel this energy rather than fight it, weaving connections between subjects until history became a story, and mathematics became a puzzle, and even the dreaded French conjugations took on a kind of music. By midday, clouds had gathered over the estate, threatening rain that would keep them indoors for the afternoon. Eliza released Lily to the care of her nursemaid for luncheon and made her way downstairs to review the morning's household matters with Mrs. Aldridge. She was crossing the main hall when she heard voices from the drawing-room, the Duke's low rumble and a higher, more animated counterpoint that she recognized with a mixture of resignation and dread. Lady Fortescue had come to call. Eliza altered her course toward the servants' stairs, hoping to escape unnoticed, but she was too late. The drawing-room door opened, and the Duke himself emerged, his expression smoothed into the mask of polite neutrality he wore for visitors. "Miss Thornwood, a word, if you please." There was no refusing a direct summons. Eliza inclined her head and followed him into the drawing-room, where Lady Fortescue sat enthroned on the best settee, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Eliza's appearance, with barely concealed contempt. Lady Fortescue was a widow of substantial means, and even more substantial ambition, with a marriageable daughter she had been dangling before the Duke for the better part of 2 years. That he showed not the slightest interest in Miss Fortescue's china doll prettiness had not dimmed her mother's determination. If anything, his indifference seemed to inflame it. "Miss Thornwood," Lady Fortescue's smile did not reach her eyes. How delightful! I was just telling His Grace how remarkable it is that you have remained in this position for so long. 3 years, is it not? Quite unprecedented for a companion. Miss Thornwood has made herself indispensable, the Duke said. His voice was flat, offering nothing. Indeed, indispensable. Lady Fortescue's emphasis made the word sound somehow improper. Well, I suppose every great house needs someone to manage the little details. It must be such a comfort to have a woman's touch about the place, even if— She let the sentence trail off with delicate implication. Eliza's spine stiffened. She recognized the attack for what it was, a subtle undermining designed to plant seeds of doubt without being so overt as to give offence. Lady Fortescue was a master of this particular art. "I am fortunate to serve in such a well-run establishment," she said carefully. "His Grace sets the highest standards for his household." Of course, of course." Lady Fortescue waved a hand laden with rings. "And little Lady Lily, how does she get on? Such a tragedy, losing both parents so young. I imagine she's become quite attached to you, Miss Thornwood. Unhealthily so, perhaps. Children do form these dependencies when they lack proper maternal guidance." The barb was aimed at Sebastian, as much as Eliza a reminder that he had failed to remarry and provide his niece with a proper stepmother. Eliza watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Lily is a resilient and accomplished child," he said. "Miss Thornwood has been instrumental in her education and well-being. I am satisfied with the arrangement." "Satisfied? Yes, I'm sure." Lady Fortescue rose from her seat with the air of a general who has planted her flags and sees no need for further battle today. "Well, I must be off. So much to do before the Hartington ball next week. You will be attending, Your Grace? The entire county is simply buzzing about it." "I have not yet decided." "But you must. My Amelia will be devastated if you don't dance with her at least once. She spoke of nothing else after your last meeting, said you were the most fascinating man she had ever encountered." Eliza busied herself with straightening a vase of flowers that needed no straightening. Miss Amelia Fortescue was 19, pretty in a conventional way, and possessed of an intellect that could most charitably be described as undeveloped. The idea of Sebastian making polite conversation with her for the length of a dance was almost pitiable. "I will take it under consideration," Sebastian said, in a tone that indicated he would do nothing of the sort. Lady Fortescue departed in a rustle of expensive silk, trailing observations about the weather, the state of the roads, and the shocking behaviour of a neighbouring family whose daughter had been seen riding unchaperoned with a young officer. Eliza remained frozen by the flower arrangement until the sound of hooves on gravel indicated the lady's carriage had finally departed. "You handled that well." She startled. The Duke had moved closer while she was distracted, and now stood near enough that she could smell the clean scent of his soap and the faint trace of ink on his fingers. "I'm afraid I don't know what your Grace means." Lady Fortescue was attempting to poison the well. "You responded with grace under pressure. It is appreciated." Eliza finally looked up and found him watching her with that intensity she both craved and feared. His grey eyes seemed darker today, troubled by something she could not name. "She is not wrong about everything," Eliza heard herself say. "My position here is unusual. People will talk. People always talk. It is their primary entertainment." His jaw tightened again. "You are not concerned with what Lady Fortescue thinks." "I am concerned with what everyone thinks, Your Grace. My reputation is—" She stopped, the words too raw to speak aloud. Her reputation was the only currency she possessed. An unmarried woman of gentle birth, without fortune or powerful connections, lived and died by the opinions of others. "Your reputation is spotless." His voice had taken on an edge. You are the model of propriety. No one could find fault with your conduct." "No one except me," Eliza thought. "No one except you, if you knew the way I think about you in the dark hours of the night." "Thank you, Your Grace." She dropped a curtsy, retreating into formality. "If there is nothing else, I should see to the household accounts." For a moment she thought he would stop her. His hand twitched at his side, and something flashed in his eyes that looked almost like desperation. But then the mask settled back into place, and he merely nodded. "Of course. Please see that the east wing windows are properly sealed before winter. I noticed a draught yesterday." "Of course, Your Grace." She fled before she could say something foolish. The Hartington ball arrived on a night of unexpected warmth, the last breath of autumn before winter's chill set in. Eliza was not attending companions, and governesses did not attend county balls, regardless of their birth. But she had spent the better part of 2 days helping prepare the household for his Grace's rare social appearance. The Duke had decided to go. He had not explained why, and Eliza had not asked, but she suspected it had something to do with Lady Fortescue's parting comments about the county buzzing about his absence. Sebastian Vane might despise social functions, but he was too proud to let it be said that he was hiding from them. She stood in the main hall as he descended the stairs, dressed in impeccable evening clothes that had been pressed to perfection by his valet. The stark black and white of formal attire suited him, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the distinguished silver at his temples. He looked every inch the Duke powerful, unapproachable, and devastatingly handsome. Eliza's heart performed an embarrassing flutter that she ruthlessly suppressed. "You look very well, Your Grace." "I look like a man being led to his execution." He tugged at his cravat, which was already perfectly tied. "I despise these affairs." "Then why attend?" The question was too direct. She saw his eyebrows rise and immediately regretted speaking. "Because there are expectations," he said slowly. "Because running away does not make them disappear. Because—" He stopped, something shifting behind his eyes. "Because I am the Duke of Ashworth, and I have been hiding long enough." Eliza did not know how to respond to this unexpected vulnerability. Before she could formulate something appropriate, Lily came, thundering down the stairs in her nightgown, pursued by her exasperated nursemaid. "Uncle Sebastian, you can't leave without saying good night." His expression softened in a way that transformed him entirely. He crouched down to Lily's level, heedless of his immaculate evening clothes, and accepted the fierce hug she threw around his neck. "I thought we said good night already." "That was only the preliminary good night. This is the proper one." Lily pulled back to examine him critically. "You look very distinguished, like a painting of someone important." "I shall endeavour to live up to the canvas." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Be good for Miss Thornwood, and no frogs in any pockets while I'm gone." "I make no promises." She grinned, gap-toothed and mischievous, before allowing herself to be led back upstairs. Sebastian straightened and met Eliza's eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. "I should return by midnight," he said. "Don't wait up." "I wouldn't dream of it, Your Grace." They both knew it was a lie. Eliza would wait, as she always waited, keeping vigil in the library with her mending or her lists, until the sound of his carriage on the gravel released her to sleep. He left in a swirl of cape and cold air, and Eliza stood in the empty hall listening to the silence he left behind. She did not wait in the library that night. Instead, she sat with Lily until the child fell asleep, then retreated to her own room to write letters she would never send. Letters to her father, long dead, demanding to know why he had gambled away their future. Letters to her mother, dead even longer, asking if this was really all life had to offer. letters to Sebastian Vane, confessing things that could never be spoken aloud. The clock struck 11, then 12. Eliza's candle burned low. She changed into her nightgown, but could not bring herself to climb into bed, so she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and sat by the window, watching for the lights of a returning carriage. 1 o'clock came and went, then 2. By 3, Eliza's worry had crystallized into something harder and colder, a fear that she could not name. At 3:30 she heard it, the distant rumble of wheels on the drive, moving too fast for safety on a dark night. She was at her window in an instant, watching the carriage lurch to a halt before the main entrance. Something was wrong. Eliza was down the stairs before she had consciously decided to move, her shawl flying behind her, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. She reached the entrance hall just as the front door crashed open and Sebastian Vane staggered through it, held upright by his coachman and a footman. His face was white as paper. His cravat had been torn away, and his shirt was stained with something dark that might have been wine, but looked horribly like blood. "Your Grace!" Eliza rushed forward without thought, her hands reaching for him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Miss Thornwood." His eyes found hers, unfocused and strange. You should be in bed. Why are you—" He swayed dangerously, and she wedged herself under his arm without hesitation, taking some of his weight. "Get him to the library," she ordered the servants. "Send for Dr. Marchmont immediately, and bring hot water and clean cloths." The next hour passed in a blur of frantic activity. The injury proved to be minor, a gash on his arm, where he had been struck by a shattered champagne glass, the result of an altercation that the servants described in confused fragments. There had been an argument, a man named Blackwood, accusations and shouting, and finally violence. Dr. Marchmont arrived, cleaned and stitched the wound, and departed with reassurances that his Grace would recover fully with proper rest. The servants were dismissed to their beds, and Eliza found herself alone in the library, with a half-conscious Duke sprawled in his usual chair, his ruined shirt hanging open over bandaged arm. "You should not be here." His voice was slurred, whether from pain or drink or simple exhaustion she could not tell. "'S not proper." "Nothing about tonight is proper, Your Grace." She poured him a measure of brandy from the sideboard, pressing the glass into his uninjured hand. "Drink this." He obeyed without argument, so unlike him that her worry sharpened into something approaching panic. She knelt beside his chair, heedless of her thin nightgown and bare feet, and studied his face in the firelight. "What happened? Who is this Blackwood? Why would anyone—" "Marcus Blackwood." The name came out like a curse. "An old enemy. We have history. It's not important." "Someone attacked you with a glass. I would say that's rather important." His laugh was hollow. "Attacked is a strong word. He made certain insinuations. I responded unwisely. The glass was incidental." "Insinuations about what?" He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "You." The word dropped between them like a stone in still water. "Me?" Eliza's voice came out strangled. "What could anyone possibly insinuate about me?" "You live in my house, in my wing." His eyes found hers, and in their grey depths she saw something that made her heart stop. "You are seen coming and going from my library at all hours. The servants talk, the neighbours talk, everyone talks." He laughed again, the sound jagged. "Blackwood merely said aloud what everyone else has been whispering, that I have debauched an innocent woman under my own roof. That your reputation is already ruined, whatever I pretend otherwise." Eliza couldn't breathe. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "But that's not— I would never—" "I know." His hand caught hers, his grip surprisingly strong. "I know. But it doesn't matter what we have or haven't done. It matters what people believe. And I have been a fool." His voice cracked on the last word. "I have kept you here because I could not bear to let you go, and in doing so I have destroyed you." "You have destroyed nothing." She gripped his hand tighter, desperate to make him understand. "I am exactly where I wish to be. My reputation—" "Your reputation is everything." He pulled away from her with sudden force, pushing himself upright in the chair. "You are a gentleman's daughter. Without your good name you have nothing. No chance of marriage, no chance of respectable employment, nothing but ruin and poverty and—" He pressed his uninjured hand over his eyes. "I cannot do this to you. I will not." "Do what?" The panic was rising in her chest now, a tide of dread she could not control. "Your Grace, what are you saying?" "I am saying you must leave Ashworth Park." Each word seemed to cost him something vital. "Tonight's events have made that clear. If you remain here, your reputation will be destroyed beyond salvage. There are already whispers Lady Fortescue saw to that. What Blackwood said tonight will spread by morning. The only way to stop it is distance, immediate, visible distance." "No." The word tore from her throat. "No, you cannot. I won't. I have already made arrangements." His voice had gone flat, the Duke's mask firmly back in place. "You will go to my mother's sister in Hertfordshire. Lady Penworth is respectable and well-connected. She will introduce you to society, help you find a suitable position, or—" he swallowed visibly, "or a suitable husband. Far from here, where the gossip cannot follow." Eliza felt as though she had been plunged into ice water. All the warmth drained from her body, leaving her cold and hollow and impossibly small. "You would send me away." Her voice did not sound like her own. "Just like that. After 3 years, you would simply— It is for your own good." The words came out harsh, almost cruel. "Can you not see that? Every day you remain here puts you at greater risk. I should have done this long ago. I was selfish. I wanted—" He stopped, jaw working. "It doesn't matter what I wanted. What matters is your future." "And what of Lily?" The thought of the child struck her like a physical blow. "What of your niece, who has already lost everyone she loves? You would take me from her as well?" Something in his face cracked. For a moment, Eliza saw the man behind the Duke wounded, desperate, terrified of causing more harm than he had already caused. Then the mask descended again, impenetrable as stone. "Lily will adapt. Children are resilient. Children are fragile." Eliza was on her feet now, trembling with rage and grief, and something she could not name. "I made her a promise. I told her I would not leave. And now you expect me to break that promise because you have decided, in your infinite wisdom, that you know what is best for everyone." "I am trying to protect you!" "I do not need your protection." The words exploded from her, 3 years of suppressed feeling breaking free at last. "I am not some delicate flower to be sheltered from the world. I am not your late wife, to be wrapped in cotton wool and kept from harm. I am myself, and I have the right to make my own choices about my own life." The silence that followed was absolute. Eliza heard her own ragged breathing, felt the tears burning behind her eyes, saw the stricken expression on Sebastian's face before he turned away. "Caroline?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You know about Caroline. Everyone knows about Caroline." The anger was draining from her now, leaving only exhaustion. "She was beautiful and perfect, and you loved her, and she died. And you have spent the past 5 years punishing yourself for it, building walls so high that no one can possibly breach them. I understand. Truly I do. But I am not her, and what happened to her will not happen to me. You don't know that. He still would not look at her. You cannot possibly know that. No one knows what the future holds, what disasters wait around every corner. All I know is that everyone I have ever loved has been destroyed by that love, and I cannot. His voice broke. I cannot watch it happen again. Eliza's heart cracked wide open. She crossed to him without thinking, placing her hand on his shoulder. He flinched, but did not pull away. Beneath her palm, she could feel the tension in every line of his body, the effort it was costing him to hold himself together. Sebastian! His name, spoken for the first time in all their years together. Listen to me, please. He turned at last, and she saw that his eyes were wet. I'm not asking you for anything, she said quietly. I am not asking for declarations or promises or anything you are not prepared to give. I am only asking to stay, to continue as we have been, to care for Lily and manage your household and— She faltered, the words tangling in her throat. And to be here, near you. Whatever that means, whatever it costs, I am asking only for that. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. The fire had burned low, casting them both in shades of gold and shadow. Outside, the first grey light of dawn was creeping over the horizon. I cannot. The words seemed to break something inside him. God help me. I want to, more than you can possibly understand. But I cannot. If you stay, I will destroy you, the way I destroyed Caroline, the way I destroy everything I touch. You did not destroy Caroline. Eliza gripped his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. You loved her. That is not the same thing. She died because of me. The confession poured from him like blood from a wound. She was fragile. Her constitution was never strong, and I knew it, and still I insisted on an heir. I made her risk pregnancy after pregnancy, even when the doctors warned us, even when she begged me to stop. And then she was with child again. And she hid it from me because she was afraid. And when the birth went wrong— He was shaking now, his whole body trembling with the force of suppressed grief. I killed her. My pride, my obsession with legacy, my refusal to accept that some things are not meant to be. I killed her as surely as if I had put a knife to her throat. No. Eliza's own tears were falling now, hot and unstoppable. No, you did not. You made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but you did not kill her. She made her own choices. The illness made its own choices. You are not God, Sebastian. You cannot control everything, and you cannot blame yourself for everything. I can blame myself for this. He pulled away from her, putting distance between them. I can ensure that it never happens again, and that is what I am doing. I am sending you away because I love— He stopped, horrified, as if the words had escaped without permission. The world went very still. What did you say? Eliza whispered. He stood frozen, trapped between confession and denial. The mask was gone entirely now, and in its place was only a man broken, grieving, desperate to protect and terrified of the consequences. It doesn't matter. His voice was raw. None of it matters. The carriage will be ready at dawn. You will go to Hertfordshire, and you will forget any of this ever happened, and you will find someone worthy of you. Someone who can love you, without destroying you. And if I refuse? Then I will have you removed by force." The words were brutal, but his eyes begged her not to make him do it. "Please, please, Eliza, if you have ever cared for me at all, do this one thing. Let me save you, even if I cannot save myself." She could fight him. She could refuse to go, force him to make good on his threat, create a scene that would only prove Lady Fortescue's insinuations correct. Or she could accept this final cruelty as proof of what she had always known, that she was not worth fighting for, not worth keeping, not worth loving. That she was useful had only ever been useful, and now her usefulness was at an end. Very well. The words tasted like ash. "I will go." Something in his face crumbled. He reached for her one desperate, aborted gesture, then pulled back and turned away. "The carriage will be ready at 6. Mrs. Aldridge will help you pack." "And Lily?" The question scraped her throat. "Will I be allowed to say goodbye?" A long pause. Then, briefly, "I do not want to upset her more than necessary." More than necessary. As if any of this was necessary. As if any of this was anything other than a man's fear dressed up as nobility, his cowardice disguised as sacrifice. But Eliza was too exhausted to fight any more. Too broken. Too utterly without hope. "As you wish, Your Grace." She dropped a curtsy, one last gesture of the servitude he had so thoroughly enjoyed, and walked from the room without looking back. The goodbye with Lily was the worst thing Eliza had ever experienced. The child did not cry. That was the terrible part. She stood very straight and very still, her dark eyes fixed on Eliza's face with an expression of blank betrayal that was far worse than tears. "You promised," she said. "You promised you wouldn't leave." "I know." Eliza knelt before her, heedless of the travelling dress she had hastily donned, heedless of anything but the child in front of her. "I know I did, and I am so sorry. But sometimes things happen that we cannot control, and we must do things we do not wish to do. Uncle Sebastian is making you go." It wasn't a question. "I heard the servants talking. He's sending you away because of something someone said at a party." "It's complicated. It's stupid." Lily's voice shook with fury. "He's stupid. And you're stupid for letting him. And I hate both of you." She turned and ran from the room before Eliza could respond. The door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty nursery. Eliza remained kneeling on the floor for a long moment, her hand pressed to her mouth to stifle the sobs that threatened to break free. Then she rose, smoothed her skirts, and walked downstairs to the waiting carriage. The Duke was nowhere to be seen. Of course he wasn't. He had issued his decree and retreated to lick his wounds, leaving others to deal with the consequences. Mrs. Aldridge pressed a small package into her hands, some bread and cheese for the journey, because even now the housekeeper's maternal instincts overrode everything else. "Write to us," she said, her voice thick. "Let us know you've arrived safely." "I will." She climbed into the carriage. The door closed. The driver cracked his whip. And Eliza watched Ashworth Park disappear behind her, knowing that she was leaving behind everything she had ever wanted and would never be allowed to have. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable, as the English countryside rolled past her window. She wept for Lily, who had already lost so much and would now lose more. She wept for Sebastian, trapped in his prison of grief and guilt. She wept for herself, for the foolish dreams she had cherished in secret, for the love she had never dared speak aloud. But beneath the tears, something harder was beginning to form, a resolve, a determination. He thought he was protecting her by pushing her away. He thought he was saving her from ruin by sending her into exile. But Eliza Thorne had not survived her father's disgrace, her mother's death, and 3 years of precarious dependence by being passive. She had survived by being useful, and now, perhaps, it was time to be something more. She did not yet know what form that something would take. She only knew that she would not go quietly into the obscure, respectable future Sebastian Vane had planned for her. She would not be forgotten, and neither, if she had anything to say about it, would he. The carriage rattled on toward Hertfordshire, toward the unknown, toward whatever waited on the other side of this breaking. And Eliza Thorne, her tears drying on her cheeks, began to plan. Lady Penwith's house in Hertfordshire was everything Ashworth Park was not. Bright, chaotic, and filled with the constant noise of a family determined to squeeze every drop of joy from life. The Dowager Duchess's sister had raised 7 children in this rambling manor, and though most had married and moved away, the house still echoed with grandchildren's laughter, barking dogs, and the kind of cheerful disorder that would have sent Sebastian Vane into an apoplexy. Eliza had been there for 3 months. 3 months of polite conversation, of helping with correspondence, of pretending that her heart was not shattered beyond repair. Lady Penwith had asked no uncomfortable questions when she arrived on that grey November morning, hollow-eyed and silent. She had simply shown Eliza to a comfortable room, ordered tea and hot water for a bath, and left her alone to compose herself. It was the greatest kindness anyone had ever shown her. The winter had passed in a blur of small tasks and enforced rest. Eliza had written to Lily 3 times. None of her letters had been answered, though Mrs. Aldridge had sent a brief note confirming they had been received. She had not written to Sebastian at all. What was there to say? He had made his choice. She would not beg. But now spring was approaching, and with it came change. Lady Penwith's youngest daughter, Mrs. Harriet Cavendish, had arrived for an extended visit with her husband and 3 small children. The house was fuller than ever, and Eliza found herself drawn into the family's activities despite her best efforts to remain invisible. "You cannot hide in your room forever, my dear," Lady Penwith said one morning over breakfast, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "I understand the impulse, truly I do, but life must be lived, not endured." "I am not hiding," Eliza protested. "I simply prefer solitude. Yes, I had noticed." The older woman set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "Which is why I am insisting you accompany us to the Meryton Assembly this evening. No arguments. Harriet needs a sensible companion, and you need to remember that there is a world beyond whatever grief you are nursing." The Meryton Assembly. Eliza's stomach clenched. She had not attended a social gathering since arriving in Hertfordshire, had deliberately avoided any situation where she might be required to make conversation with strangers. The very thought of entering a ballroom, of being seen and assessed and found wanting, made her feel physically ill. But Lady Penwith was not a woman accustomed to being refused, and perhaps, Eliza thought wearily, it was time to stop hiding, time to begin building whatever new life awaited her, however pale and diminished it might seem compared to what she had lost. "Very well," she said. "I will attend." The assembly rooms at Meryton were modest compared to the grand ballrooms of London, but they were cheerful and well lit, filled with the cream of local society dressed in their finest. Eliza had borrowed a gown from Harriet, a soft blue silk that was slightly too fashionable for her taste, but that Lady Penwith had declared absolutely necessary if you are to make any kind of impression. She did not want to make an impression. She wanted to stand quietly in a corner, fulfill her obligation to appear in public, and return to her room as quickly as possible. But Harriet had other ideas. "Come, you must meet the Bennets," she said. taking Eliza's arm and steering her toward a cluster of people near the punch bowl. "Mrs. Bennet is the most tremendous gossip. She will know everything about everyone, which is either dreadfully tedious or wonderfully entertaining, depending on one's mood." Eliza allowed herself to be introduced, murmuring polite responses to the barrage of questions that followed. Mrs. Bennet was indeed a gossip, but her daughters seemed pleasant enough, 5 girls ranging from sensible to silly, all eager to discuss the newcomers who had recently taken the neighbouring estate. "A party from London," the eldest Miss Bennet explained, her gentle face alight with interest. "A gentleman and his friend, I believe. They are to attend this evening." "A gentleman with 5,000 a year," her mother interjected eagerly. "And his friend even wealthier, if the rumours are true. Jane, you must be sure to dance with both of them." Eliza smiled and nodded in the appropriate places, her mind wandering. She did not care about wealthy gentlemen from London. She did not care about dancing or gossip or any of the small concerns that animated these pleasant country people. She cared only about surviving this evening and returning to the quiet of her borrowed room. And then the door opened, and the world tilted on its axis. She knew him instantly, though she had never seen him before. Tall and lean, with hair the colour of burnished copper, and eyes that swept the room with an assessing intelligence that made her think absurdly of a fox surveying a hen-house. He was handsome in a sharp, dangerous way, all angles and edges where Sebastian was breadth and power, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew his own worth. But it was not his appearance that stopped her breath. It was the name that rippled through the assembly rooms like a stone dropped in still water, passed from lip to lip with mingled curiosity and excitement. "Lord Marcus Blackwood, the Baron of Thornbury. Recently returned from the continent, they say." Blackwood. The name Sebastian had spoken with such venom on that terrible night. The man who had caused the altercation at the Hartington ball. The man whose insinuations about Eliza had precipitated her exile. Her first instinct was to flee, to slip away before he could notice her, before any connection could be drawn between the Duke of Ashworth's former companion and this assembly in a quiet corner of Hertfordshire. But before she could move, those sharp eyes found hers across the crowded room, and Lord Marcus Blackwood smiled. It was a smile of recognition, though they had never met. A smile that said he knew exactly who she was and found her presence here deliciously amusing. He began to make his way toward her, pausing to acknowledge introductions with easy charm, but his attention never wavered from Eliza's face. "Miss Thornwood." He bowed over her hand with perfect propriety. "What an unexpected pleasure. I had heard you had left Ashworth Park, but I never imagined I would have the good fortune to encounter you here." "Lord Blackwood," her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I was not aware we had been introduced." "We have not, but I make it my business to know everyone of interest, and you, Miss Thornwood, are very interesting indeed." His smile widened. "The woman who managed to thaw the frozen Duke, even if only temporarily. The entire ton talked of nothing else last season." Eliza felt heat climb her cheeks. "I'm afraid you have been misinformed. I was merely a companion to his Grace's niece. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" He raised an eyebrow. "How disappointing. And here I had been hoping for a more dramatic tale. Star-crossed lovers, forbidden passion, that sort of thing." "Life is rarely so theatrical, my lord." "On the contrary, Miss Thornwood. Life is almost always theatrical. We simply fail to recognize the drama while we are living it." He offered his arm. "Walk with me. I find the punch dreadfully flat, and I suspect you are as eager to escape Mrs. Bennet's interrogation as I am." She should refuse. Every instinct screamed that this man was dangerous, that his interest in her was not benign, that whatever game he was playing would end badly for everyone involved. But curiosity won over caution, curiosity, and a fierce, reckless anger at the man who had sent her here. Sebastian thought he was protecting her by keeping her away from danger. Very well. Let him see how well his protection had worked. She took Lord Blackwood's arm. The next several weeks passed in a blur of social engagements, each one featuring Lord Marcus Blackwood more prominently than the last. He was, Eliza discovered, a man of considerable charm and even more considerable intelligence. He could converse on any topic from philosophy to farming, could make the dullest dinner party sparkle with wit, could draw confidences from even the most reticent companion with his gift for active listening. He was also, she suspected, entirely without scruples. "You don't trust me," he observed one afternoon, as they walked through Lady Penwith's garden. The early spring flowers were beginning to bloom, daffodils and crocuses nodding in the gentle breeze. "I can see it in your eyes every time I speak. You're waiting for the knife." "Should I not be?" He laughed, a genuine sound, surprisingly warm. "Probably. I have not led a blameless life, Miss Thornwood. I have made enemies, broken hearts, and committed sins that would shock your provincial sensibilities. But I am not, at this particular moment, planning to harm you." "At this particular moment? How reassuring. I am always honest about my limitations." He paused, beside a stone bench, gesturing for her to sit. "Tell me about Ashworth. Not the gossip, I know the gossip. Tell me about the man." Eliza hesitated. This was treacherous ground. Whatever had passed between Sebastian and Lord Blackwood, she had no desire to provide ammunition for either side. But something in Blackwood's expression gave her pause, a flicker of something that looked almost like genuine curiosity rather than calculated malice. "He is a good man," she said finally, "difficult and distant and infuriatingly certain of his own righteousness, but good underneath it all. He takes care of his people. He loves his niece. He carries burdens that would crush a lesser man and never complains." "You love him?" It wasn't a question. "That is none of your concern." "Perhaps not. But it is true nonetheless." Blackwood leaned back against the bench, studying her with those unsettling eyes. "What did he do to earn such loyalty? No, don't answer. I can guess. He saved you from something. Your father's debts, your mother's death, the marriage that was being arranged to that ancient roué. He swooped in like a dark avenging angel and carried you off to his castle, and you've been grateful ever since." Eliza's hands clenched in her lap. "You seem to know a great deal about my personal history, my lord. I told you, I make it my business to know interesting people, and you are interesting, Miss Thornwood, far more interesting than Ashworth deserves." He reached out and touched her chin, tilting her face toward him. "You could do better, you know. You could have a man who actually appreciates what he has, instead of locking it away in a tower for safekeeping. Is that what you're offering? Appreciation? I'm offering possibilities." His thumb traced along her jawline, the touch both gentle and proprietary. "I'm offering a life beyond waiting for a man who will never allow himself to want you. I'm offering freedom." She should pull away. She should stand up and walk back to the house and never speak to this man again. But something held her in place, not attraction exactly, but a kind of desperate curiosity. What would it feel like to be wanted openly, without shame or apology? What would it feel like to be chosen instead of discarded? "Why?" she asked. "Why me? You could have any woman in England. Why pursue the cast-off companion of your sworn enemy?" "Because you are magnificent." The words were simple, direct. "Because I watched you across the Hartington ballroom last autumn, managing that household with quiet competence, while every eye in the room dismissed you as beneath notice. Because I saw Ashworth watching you when he thought no one was looking, and I recognized the expression on his face. He loves you, Miss Thornwood. He loves you, and he sent you away rather than risk having to feel it. And that," his voice hardened, "that is a waste I cannot abide. So I am a weapon, a means to wound him. You are a woman who deserves to be valued. If that happens to wound Ashworth in the process, consider it a pleasant side effect." He released her chin and sat back. "I am not asking for your heart, Miss Thornwood. I am only asking for your hand. Marry me. Let me give you the life you deserve. And if, in the process, we teach Ashworth a valuable lesson about the cost of taking beautiful things for granted, well, I can think of worse ways to spend a marriage." Eliza stared at him. Of all the things she had expected from this conversation, a proposal of marriage had not been among them. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious about acquisitions." He smiled, but there was something genuine beneath the mockery. "I know what I am offering sounds calculated. It is. But I am also offering something real, a partnership between two intelligent people who understand the world as it actually is, not as romantic fantasy would have it be. You would want for nothing. You would have freedom to pursue your interests, to manage our household as you see fit, to build whatever life appeals to you. And in return, I would have a wife whose company I actually enjoy, which is more than most marriages can claim." And what of love? Love is a fairy story told to keep young women compliant. Respect, affection, compatible temperaments, those are the foundations of a successful marriage. Love is just the gilt on the frame. He stood, offering her his hand. "Think about it. I'm not asking for an answer today, but think about what I'm offering. Think about what the alternative is: years of genteel poverty, watching from the shadows while Ashworth eventually marries some insipid heiress for her fortune and her womb. Is that really what you want?" No, Eliza thought. No, that was not what she wanted. She had never wanted anything less, and for the first time since leaving Ashworth Park, she felt something other than despair. She felt possibility. Lady Penworth was not pleased. "Marcus Blackwood?" She set down her embroidery with an expression of deep concern. "My dear girl, you cannot be seriously considering his suit. He has been nothing but courteous and attentive." Eliza kept her voice calm, though her heart was racing. "His reputation may be questionable, but his behavior toward me has been exemplary. His behavior toward you has been calculated to appear exemplary. There is a difference." Lady Penworth rose from her chair and crossed to where Eliza sat by the window. "I knew his father, you know. The old Baron was a scoundrel of the first order, broke his wife's heart with his infidelities, and gambled away half the family fortune before dying in a duel over another man's wife. Marcus has spent the past decade rebuilding what his father destroyed, and I give him credit for that. But a man does not achieve what he has achieved without being ruthless. Perhaps ruthlessness is what I need." The words surprised Eliza as much as they seemed to surprise Lady Penworth. "I have spent my entire life being careful, being proper, being so excruciatingly correct that no one could ever find fault with me. And where has it gotten me? Dismissed like a servant, exiled to the countryside, watching my entire future crumble because one man decided he knew what was best for me. You are angry, that is understandable, but anger is a poor foundation for marriage. What is a good foundation, then? Love?" Eliza laughed bitterly. "I loved Sebastian Vane. I loved him for 3 years, without ever speaking the words aloud, without ever receiving anything in return but glimpses and fragments and the occasional moment of warmth that he immediately withdrew. If that is love, I want no part of it." Lady Penworth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "What happened between you and my nephew-in-law is not my business, though I have my suspicions. But I will tell you this. Marcus Blackwood's interest in you is not coincidental. He and Ashworth have hated each other for nearly 15 years, ever since Marcus courted Caroline Ashworth before she became the Duchess. He lost her to Sebastian, and he has never forgiven the slight." Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "He courted Caroline?" He was mad for her. Everyone expected them to marry. They were perfectly suited in temperament and fortune. But then Ashworth came along, and Caroline chose the title over the man who loved her. Lady Penworth's eyes were sad. Marcus has spent years looking for ways to wound Sebastian. I cannot help but wonder if you are simply the latest weapon in an old war. He told me as much himself. Eliza met her benefactress's eyes steadily. He has been honest about his motivations, more honest than Sebastian ever was. Honest about using you to hurt another man, and this does not give you pause. It gives me clarity. Eliza rose and began to pace the length of the room. I have no illusions about Lord Blackwood's feelings for me. He finds me interesting, perhaps even admires me. But he does not love me. He has made that perfectly clear. What he offers is a partnership, one in which I would have security, status, and freedom. Is that not more than most marriages provide? Most marriages are not undertaken specifically to wound a third party. The wounding of Sebastian Vane is incidental to my decision. The words tasted like a lie, but Eliza pressed on. I am thinking of my own future. I am 24 years old, without fortune or family connections, and my reputation, whatever Sebastian may claim, has been irreparably damaged by 3 years of living in an unmarried man's household. Who else would have me? Someone who values you for yourself, not for what you represent to his enemy. Such a paragon does not exist. Eliza stopped by the window, staring out at the garden where Marcus had proposed. Or if he does, he has already had the opportunity to claim me, and chose instead to send me away. Lady Penworth sighed heavily. I cannot stop you. You are of age and not my ward. But I beg you to think carefully before accepting Lord Blackwood. Whatever satisfaction you imagine you will feel at Sebastian's reaction, it will not be worth the price of a lifetime bound to a man who sees you as a chess piece. Perhaps I'm tired of being seen any other way. Eliza turned back to face her. At least Lord Blackwood is honest about the game we are playing. Sebastian pretended there was no game at all, and left me to discover the rules only after I had already lost. There was nothing Lady Penworth could say to that, and she did not try. She simply embraced Eliza tightly and left her alone with her thoughts. Eliza accepted Lord Blackwood's proposal 3 days later. The engagement was announced in the London papers within the week, and the reaction was everything Marcus had predicted. Scandal sheets buzzed with speculation, society matrons whispered behind their fans, and from Ashworth Park there came only silence. Eliza tried not to think about what that silence meant. She tried not to imagine Sebastian's face when he read the announcement, or Lily's reaction to learning that her beloved Miss Thornwood was to marry Uncle Sebastian's enemy. She tried to focus on the practicalities, the wedding preparations, the trousseau, the new life that awaited her as Baroness of Thornbury. But at night, alone in her borrowed room, the doubts came creeping. What was she doing? Marrying a man she did not love to spite a man she could not stop loving? Trading one form of imprisonment for another, simply because the new cage came with prettier bars? Marcus was kind to her, in his way. He brought her flowers and books and little gifts that showed he paid attention to her preferences. He made her laugh with his wicked observations about their neighbours. He treated her with a respect that Sebastian had never quite managed, always asking her opinion before making decisions that affected them both. But there was no warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, no catch in his breath when their hands touched, no sense that her presence made any fundamental difference to his existence. She was useful to him, that was all. The realization should have been devastating. Instead, it felt almost comfortable. She knew how to be useful. She had been useful her entire life. At least with Marcus, there were no false pretenses, no aching hope that utility might somehow transform into something more. The wedding was set for June. Eliza threw herself into the preparations with grim determination, refusing to allow herself any second thoughts. What was done was done. She had made her choice, and she would live with the consequences. And then, 3 weeks before the wedding, came the letter. It arrived on a grey morning, delivered by a rider who had clearly travelled hard and fast from somewhere distant. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, not Sebastian's bold hand, nor Mrs. Aldridge's careful script. Eliza's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. "Miss Thornwood, I am writing against the express wishes of His Grace, who has forbidden any member of the household from contacting you, but I believe you have a right to know what has happened, and I am old enough to bear the consequences of my disobedience. Lady Lily has run away. She disappeared 3 days ago, taking nothing but the clothes on her back and a small sum of money she had saved from her pin money. We found a note in her room saying she had gone to find you, that she could not bear to remain at Ashworth Park without you, that if no one else would bring you home, she would go and fetch you herself. His Grace is beside himself. He has sent men in every direction, but thus far there has been no trace of her. We fear the worst. I know you have no reason to care what becomes of this household after the way you were treated. But Lily loves you, and I believe you love her. If you have any knowledge of her whereabouts, or if she has somehow made her way to you, please send word immediately. Yours in desperation, Mrs. Aldridge." The letter fell from Eliza's nerveless fingers. Lily. 8-year-old Lily, out in the world alone, trying to cross the country to reach a woman who had promised never to leave and then broken that promise. Lily, who had already lost everyone she loved. Lily, who was now lost herself because Eliza had been too proud, too wounded, too consumed with her own pain to think about what her departure would mean. She was on her feet before she knew she was moving, shouting for her maid, for Lady Penworth, for anyone who could help her prepare to leave immediately. She had to go to Ashworth Park. She had to help find Lily. Nothing else mattered, not the wedding, not Marcus, not even Sebastian. Nothing mattered but the child. The journey north took 2 days of hard travel. Eliza barely slept, barely ate, her mind consumed with visions of Lily hurt or frightened or worse. She had hired a private carriage and instructed the driver to change horses as often as necessary, paying whatever it cost to shave hours off the journey. She arrived at Ashworth Park at dusk on the 2nd day, stumbling from the carriage on legs stiff from sitting. The great house loomed before her, achingly familiar despite everything that had happened. The windows blazed with light. The entire household was clearly awake, despite the late hour. She had barely reached the front steps when the door flew open and Sebastian Vane emerged. He looked terrible. His dark hair was dishevelled, his cravat missing entirely, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. He stopped short when he saw her, his expression cycling through a dozen emotions too quickly to name shock, relief, anger, longing, and something that looked almost like agony. "You came." His voice was hoarse. "I didn't. Mrs. Aldridge wasn't supposed to. Where is she?" Eliza pushed past him into the entrance hall. "Have you found her? Is she safe?" "We don't know. We've searched everywhere within a day's ride. There's been no trace." He followed her, his hand reaching for her arm and then pulling back. "How did you get here so quickly? The letter could only have reached you yesterday." "I left within the hour of receiving it." She was already striding toward the library, her mind racing through possibilities. What exactly did her note say? What route would she have taken? Who has she been talking to recently who might have given her ideas about travel? "Eliza." His hand caught her elbow, stopping her. "Eliza, stop. Look at me." She turned, and the raw emotion in his face nearly undid her. "I am so sorry." The words seemed to cost him everything. "I never meant for this to happen. I never imagined she would. I thought I was protecting both of you, and instead I've—" His voice broke. "If anything happens to her, I will never forgive myself. Nothing is going to happen to her." Eliza made her voice firm, though her heart was hammering. "She is intelligent and resourceful, and she loves you. She would not do anything truly dangerous. She is 8 years old. Everything is dangerous when you are 8 years old. Then we will find her before anything dangerous can happen." She pulled her arm free and continued toward the library. "Now, show me the note. Show me everything you've found. We are wasting time standing here trading recriminations." For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then something in his expression shifted, a kind of wondering recognition, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time. "God, I've missed you," he said. Eliza pretended not to hear. They worked through the night, poring over maps and interviewing servants, and piecing together every scrap of information about Lily's movements in the days before her disappearance. By dawn, a picture had begun to emerge. Lily had not simply run away in a fit of emotion. She had planned. She had saved money. She had asked questions of the cook's son, who had once worked as a stable hand at a posting inn, about how one might travel across country without attracting attention. She had taken a specific route, not the main roads, where she might be recognized, but smaller paths through villages where a well-dressed child might pass unremarked. "She's heading for Hertfordshire," Eliza said, tracing the route on the map. "She's going to Lady Penworth's house. She thinks that's where I am." "Then we go to Hertfordshire." Sebastian was already moving toward the door. "I'll have the carriage brought around immediately." "Wait!" Eliza caught his arm. "If she's travelling on foot and by farmer's cart, as your stable master suggests, she won't have made it halfway yet. We need to intercept her on the road, not wait for her at the destination." "Then where do we start?" Eliza studied the map, calculating distances and likely stopping points. "Here." She pointed to a small market town about 3 days' walk from Ashworth Park. "It's on the route she would likely take, and it's large enough to have an inn where a child might try to find shelter. We should start there and work backward." Sebastian nodded, his expression grim. "I'll have 2 horses saddled. We can travel faster that way than by carriage." "I'll ride with you." He hesitated. "You don't have to. She ran away to find me." Eliza met his eyes steadily. "I will not sit here and wait while others search for her. I owe her that much." For a moment she thought he would argue, but then he simply nodded and strode from the room, calling for his stable master as he went. They rode hard through the morning, stopping only to change horses and make inquiries at every inn and farmhouse along the way. At first there was nothing. No one had seen a young girl travelling alone. No one remembered anything unusual. But by mid-afternoon they had their first lead. "Aye, I remember her," said the innkeeper at a coaching station on the main road. "Dark-haired little thing, dressed too fine for the likes of this place. She came in yesterday morning asking about coaches to Hertfordshire. I told her she needed money for a ticket, and she looked at me like I'd suggested she murder her grandmother." "Did you see where she went?" Sebastian's voice was sharp with desperation. "South, I think. On foot. She had a stubborn look about her, reminded me of my own daughter, truth be told. I thought about stopping her, asking if she needed help, but she was gone before I could get around the counter." They pushed on, following the southern road, stopping at every cottage and shop to ask if anyone had seen a young girl travelling alone. The sun was beginning to set when they finally found her. She was sitting on a stone wall beside a sheep pasture, her fine dress torn and muddy, her dark hair tangled around a face streaked with tears. When she saw them approaching on horseback, she scrambled to her feet and began to run, not away, but toward them, her arms outstretched, and a sob tearing from her throat. Eliza was off her horse before it had fully stopped, dropping to her knees in the dirt as Lily crashed into her arms. The child was crying so hard she could barely breathe, her words coming out in broken fragments. You came. I knew you would come. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay there without you." "Hush." Eliza held her tightly, her own tears falling freely. "Hush, my darling. I'm here now. I'm here." Sebastian dismounted more slowly, approaching the pair with an expression that wavered between overwhelming relief and something that looked very much like heartbreak. He knelt beside them in the mud, heedless of his clothing, and wrapped his arms around them both. "Never," he said hoarsely, "never do that again. Do you understand me? You could have been killed. You could have been—" His voice broke. "I cannot lose you, Lily. I cannot. You sent her away." Lily's accusation was muffled against Eliza's shoulder. "You promised you would take care of us, and then you sent her away." "I know." Sebastian's hand stroked his niece's tangled hair. "I know. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Will you bring her back?" Lily pulled back to look at him, her face blotchy with tears. "Will you let her stay this time?" Sebastian's eyes met Eliza's over his niece's head. In them she saw everything he had never allowed himself to say, love and longing, and a desperate hope that it was not too late. "That," he said quietly, "is not my decision to make." They found lodging at a nearby inn, a modest establishment whose proprietress was sympathetic to the tale of a runaway child and her frantic guardians. Lily was bathed and fed and put to bed in the inn's best room, falling asleep almost instantly with the exhaustion of her adventure, which left Eliza and Sebastian alone in the small parlour, the fire burning low between them. "You're engaged." He said it flatly, stating a fact rather than asking a question. "To Marcus Blackwood." "Yes." "Do you love him?" Eliza considered lying. It would be easier, in some ways a clean break, a clear ending to whatever had existed between them. But she was tired of lies, tired of evasions, tired of pretending that the truth could be avoided forever. "No," she said, "I don't love him." Sebastian closed his eyes. "Then why?" "Because he asked. Because he wanted me. Because when you sent me away, I thought—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "I thought I would never feel anything again. And then he came along, and he was honest about what he wanted. And it seemed like enough. It seemed like more than I deserved. More than you deserved." He opened his eyes, and the raw pain in them made her breath catch. "Eliza, you deserve everything. You deserve a man who adores you, who cannot imagine his life without you, who would move heaven and earth to make you happy. You deserve—" He laughed bitterly. "You deserve far better than me. I know that. I have always known that." "Then why did you send me away?" The question hung between them, demanding an answer he had never been willing to give. Sebastian rose from his chair and crossed to the window, staring out at the darkness beyond. "I told you about Caroline," he said quietly, "about what I did to her, what I believed I did to her. But I didn't tell you all of it." He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was distant, lost in memory. "I loved Caroline. Not the way I—" He stopped, swallowed. "I loved her the way a young man loves his first infatuation. She was beautiful and charming, and everything I had been told to want. But she was also fragile, and I refused to see it. I refused to see anything that contradicted what I wanted to believe." "What happened?" Eliza asked softly. "She became pregnant within the first year of our marriage. It was difficult. She was ill constantly, could barely keep food down. The doctors warned that her constitution was not suited for childbearing. But she insisted on continuing, and I—" His voice cracked. "I was so desperate for an heir. so consumed with duty and legacy, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. He turned back to face her, his expression haunted. She miscarried that first child, and the second, and the third. Each time it happened, she grew weaker, more fragile. The doctors begged me to stop, begged me to accept that we might never have children, that trying again would kill her. But she wouldn't listen, and I was too cowardly to make her. Sebastian. The fourth pregnancy seemed different. She was stronger, further along than she had ever gotten before. We both allowed ourselves to hope. His laugh was hollow. She hid how sick she was. She hid everything from me because she knew I would try to protect her, and she couldn't bear my protection any more, and when the birth came, he couldn't finish. He didn't need to. She died, thinking I blamed her, he said, for not giving me an heir, for not being strong enough. She died believing she had failed me, when in truth I was the one who failed her. I failed to see her. I failed to protect her from my own expectations. I failed to love her the way she deserved to be loved. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. Eliza rose and crossed to him, stopping just short of touching distance. Sebastian, what happened to Caroline was a tragedy. But it was not your fault, not entirely. She made choices too. The doctors made choices. Everyone involved shares the responsibility. That's what I told myself. For years, that's what I told myself. He met her eyes, and the intensity there made her heart stutter. And then you came, and you were so different from Caroline, so strong and capable and utterly unbreakable. I watched you manage my household and care for my niece and handle every crisis with such grace, and I thought, here is a woman who does not need protection. Here is a woman who could be my equal, my partner, my... He stopped, struggling for words. But then I would look at you and feel what I felt. And I would remember. I would remember what happened when I loved Caroline. And I would think, what if I'm wrong again? What if I only see what I want to see? What if I convince myself that she's strong enough to bear my love, and then I destroy her the way I destroyed my wife? So you sent me away. Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. Because you loved me. Because I was terrified of loving you. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. I thought if I could just keep you at a distance, if I could protect you from my feelings, then I could protect you from my curse. But all I did was hurt you, and now you belong to someone else, and I have no right to ask you to. I don't belong to anyone. Eliza caught his hand, holding it against her face. Not to Marcus, and not to you. I belong to myself. I know. That's what makes you. He swallowed hard. That's what I love about you. That's what I love. The words fell into the silence like stones, into still water, ripples spreading outward until they touched every corner of the room. You love me, Eliza repeated. I love you. I have loved you for longer than I can remember. I have loved you so completely and so desperately that the thought of living without you feels like being asked to live without air. He closed his eyes, pain etched across his features. But I have no right to say it. You are engaged to another man, a man I gave you to with my own cowardice and cruelty. Marcus doesn't want me, Eliza said quietly. He wants to hurt you. I am merely the weapon he chose. Sebastian's eyes flew open. What? He told me himself. He courted me because I belonged to you, because he knew that taking me would wound you in ways that nothing else could. He does not love me. He does not even pretend to love me. He simply saw an opportunity for revenge, and I was foolish enough to provide it. And you still agreed to marry him? Sebastian's voice was rough with something that might have been anger, or might have been anguish. I agreed because I was angry, because I wanted to hurt you the way you had hurt me, because I thought—" She laughed, the sound jagged and bitter. "I thought if I couldn't have love, I might as well have spite. It seemed like a fair trade at the time. And now?" Eliza looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the Duke's facade to the wounded man beneath. He was not perfect. He was not the romantic hero of her girlhood fantasies. He was difficult and distant, and had caused her immeasurable pain. But he was also the man who had welcomed her into his home when she had nowhere else to go, the man who had trusted her with his household and his niece, the man who had sat with her in companionable silence on countless evenings, their connection too deep for words, the man who loved her, who had always loved her, even when he was too terrified to admit it. "Now," she said slowly, "I think we have both been fools, and I think it is time to stop." She rose on her toes and kissed him. For a moment he was frozen, too shocked to respond. Then his arms came around her with desperate strength, and he was kissing her back with all the passion he had suppressed for years, fierce and tender and consuming, a confession more eloquent than any words could be. "Eliza." He breathed her name against her lips like a prayer. "Eliza, I don't deserve—" "Stop!" She pulled back just far enough to meet his eyes. "Stop telling me what you deserve. Stop deciding what I should want. For once in your life, Sebastian Vane, just ask me what I want, and then trust me to know my own mind." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile began to spread across his face, the first genuine smile she had ever seen him wear, transforming his stern features into something almost boyish. "What do you want, Eliza Thornwood?" She considered the question carefully. "I want to break my engagement to Marcus Blackwood. I want to return to Ashworth Park and continue raising Lily. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I am exactly where I belong. And," his voice was rough with hope, "and I want you to stop hiding from your feelings. I want you to let me in all the way in, not just the parts you think I can handle. I want a partner, not a protector. I want—" She took a breath. "I want to spend the rest of my life with a man who loves me, and who is brave enough to show it. Even if that man has spent years pushing you away, even then," she smiled. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Sebastian, even difficult dukes who think they know best." He laughed, an actual laugh, full and warm, and pulled her close again. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you," he murmured against her hair. "I will probably fail more often than I succeed, but I will never stop trying. I swear it." "That," Eliza said, "is all I have ever asked." From the doorway came a small, sleepy voice. "Does this mean you're staying?" They turned to find Lily standing in her nightgown, her dark eyes wide with hope. How long she had been watching, Eliza could not guess. Long enough, clearly. "Yes," Eliza said, opening her arms. "I'm staying." Lily flew across the room and threw herself at them both, and for a long moment the three of them stood wrapped together, a family forged from loss and love and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. "I knew you would fix it," Lily said smugly. "I knew if I ran away you would both have to stop being stupid." "That," Sebastian said dryly, "was extremely dangerous and absolutely forbidden, and you are grounded until you turn 30. "Worth it," Lily declared, and buried her face in Eliza's shoulder with a contented sigh. Breaking the engagement to Marcus Blackwood proved simpler than Eliza had feared. She wrote to him the next morning, explaining in plain terms that she could not marry him not because of Sebastian, but because she had finally recognized that she deserved more than a partnership of convenience. She expected anger, recriminations, perhaps even threats. What she received instead was a brief note that surprised her with its honesty. "Miss Thornwood, I cannot say I am surprised. You were always too good for my scheme, even if you couldn't see it yourself. For what it's worth, I wish you well. Ashworth is a fool, but he is an honest one, which is more than I can say for myself. Perhaps you will succeed in teaching him what I never could, that love is not a weakness to be feared, but a strength to be embraced. I bear you no ill will. In truth, you have done me a favour, shown me that revenge is a hollow pursuit, and that some wounds are better left to heal than to be constantly reopened. Be happy. It would be a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Yours, in reluctant admiration, Marcus Blackwood." Eliza read the letter twice, then tucked it away in her writing desk. Perhaps there was more to Lord Blackwood than she had given him credit for. Perhaps in another life they might even have been friends, but that was a consideration for another day. For now she had a household to reclaim and a future to build. The scandal, when it came, was spectacular. Word of Eliza's broken engagement spread through society like wildfire, carried on the gleeful tongues of gossips who had been waiting for just such a delicious morsel. That the Duke of Ashworth had ridden through the night to find his runaway niece in the company of his former companion, that they had returned to his estate together, that the engagement to his sworn enemy had been dissolved within days, all of this provided enough fodder for speculation to last the entire season. Lady Fortescue was particularly vocal in her condemnation. "Shameless," she declared to anyone who would listen. "Absolutely shameless. That woman has been scheming to trap his Grace from the moment she entered his household. Mark my words, there will be an announcement within the month, and then we shall see what kind of duchess this fortune-hunter makes." But Lady Fortescue had underestimated both the Duke and his household. Sebastian made no announcement. He made no public declarations of any kind. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He simply lived his life, openly and without apology, with Eliza at his side. She resumed her position at Ashworth Park, but the nature of that position had fundamentally changed. She was no longer the invisible companion, the useful servant who managed everything while receiving credit for nothing. She was introduced to visitors as Miss Thornwood, who has been invaluable to this household. She sat at Sebastian's right hand at dinner. She accompanied him to church on Sundays, her arm through his, while the local gentry watched with barely concealed fascination. And slowly, inexorably, the scandal began to transform into something else entirely. "They say he is courting her properly," Mrs. Aldridge reported one afternoon, having returned from the village with a basket of provisions and a wealth of gossip. "The vicar's wife told Mrs. Patterson, who told the baker, who told me. They say his Grace is mad about her, that he can barely take his eyes off her when they are in company together." "People will say anything," Eliza replied, though she could feel the colour rising in her cheeks. "People are not wrong in this case." Mrs. Aldridge's eyes twinkled. "I have been in this household for 30 years, Miss Thornwood. I have never seen his Grace look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even—" She stopped, catching herself. "Not even Lady Caroline?" Eliza finished gently. The housekeeper nodded, her expression softening. "The late Duchess was a lovely woman, and his Grace cared for her deeply. But there was always something careful in the way he treated her, as though she might break if he held too tightly." She reached out and squeezed Eliza's hand. "With you, he is different, freer, more himself than I have ever known him to be." Eliza thought about this conversation often in the weeks that followed. She thought about it when Sebastian found excuses to seek her out throughout the day, consulting her on household matters, asking her opinion on estate business, simply appearing in whatever room she happened to occupy with the air of a man who could not quite believe his good fortune. She thought about it when they walked through the gardens in the evening, his hand warm around hers, discussing everything and nothing while the sun sank below the horizon. She thought about it when he kissed her good-night at her chamber door each evening, kisses that grew longer and more desperate as the days passed, until they were both breathless and trembling with the effort of propriety. "We should marry soon," he said one night, his forehead pressed against hers, "before I lose what remains of my self-control and do something that requires a special license." Eliza laughed, though her heart was racing. "Is that your proposal, Your Grace? A warning about your deteriorating willpower?" "No." He pulled back, his expression suddenly serious. "No, that was merely an observation. The proposal is this." He dropped to one knee, right there in the corridor, heedless of the cold stone floor, or the possibility that a passing servant might witness his uncharacteristic display of vulnerability. "Eliza Thornwood," he said, taking her hands in his, "I have loved you from the moment you walked into my household and began putting everything in order, including me. I have loved you through 3 years of silence and denial. I have loved you through separation and jealousy, and the particular agony of watching you plan to marry another man. I have loved you badly and fearfully, and with all the clumsiness of a man who forgot how to feel anything but guilt." His voice roughened, but he pressed on. "I am not offering you perfection. I am difficult and distant and prone to making decisions that affect other people without consulting them first. I will probably make you angry at least once a week for the rest of our lives. But I am also offering you everything I have, and everything I am: my home, my name, my heart, and my solemn promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, not the ostentatious diamond she might have expected from a duke, but a simple gold band set with a single pearl, warm and luminous in the candlelight. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She had a long and happy marriage to a man who adored her beyond reason. I hoped it might bring us the same fortune." Eliza's vision blurred with tears. She tried to speak and found that her throat had closed entirely. "If you need time to consider," Sebastian began, misreading her silence, "I understand completely. I know I have given you little reason to trust." "Yes," she managed. He blinked. "Yes? You need time?" "Yes. I will marry you, you impossible man." She pulled him to his feet and kissed him with all the feelings she had kept contained for so long. "Yes, today, tomorrow, whenever the banns can be read. Yes, to everything. Yes, forever." His arms came around her with the strength of a man who had finally stopped running from his own happiness. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you. I love you. I love you." And Eliza, who had spent her whole life being useful rather than cherished, finally allowed herself to believe it. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a brilliant morning in late spring. It was not the grand society affair that might have been expected from a duke's marriage. Sebastian had made it clear that he had no interest in turning their union into a spectacle for the gossips who had feasted on their story for months. Instead, the ceremony was held in the small chapel at Ashworth Park, with only family and close friends in attendance. Lady Penworth had travelled from Hertfordshire, beaming with vindicated satisfaction. "I knew from the moment I saw you together," she told Eliza as she helped her dress that morning. "When you arrived at my house, heartbroken and determined not to show it, I knew that whatever had happened between you and my nephew-in-law was not finished. Some loves are simply too stubborn to die." The Dowager Duchess had also come, though her feelings about the match were considerably more complex. She had spent years hoping Sebastian would marry someone of impeccable pedigree and substantial fortune, someone like Miss Amelia Fortescue, perhaps, or one of the diamond-bright debutantes who emerged each season. An impoverished earl's daughter with a scandalous broken engagement was not what she had envisioned for her son. But even she could not deny the transformation that had come over Sebastian since Eliza's return. He smiled now, actually smiled, with his whole face. He laughed at dinner. He spent hours playing with Lily in the gardens, getting grass stains on his impeccable trousers and not caring in the slightest. He was, for the first time since Caroline's death, genuinely happy. "I suppose you will do," the Dowager said to Eliza on the morning of the wedding, which from her was practically an embrace. Lily served as flower girl, taking her duties with the utmost seriousness. She had been involved in every aspect of the wedding planning, offering opinions on flowers and music and the precise shade of ribbon that should trim Eliza's gown. Now, walking down the aisle ahead of the bride, she scattered rose petals with military precision, and only paused once to wave enthusiastically at her uncle. And then Eliza was walking toward Sebastian, and everything else faded away. He stood at the altar in his finest clothes, his dark hair silvered at the temples, his grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in the world, as though he still could not quite believe she was real, that she had chosen him, that after everything they had endured, they were finally here. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient words and sacred promises. Eliza spoke her vows clearly and without hesitation, meaning every syllable. When Sebastian slipped the pearl ring onto her finger, his hands trembled slightly. This man who was always so controlled, so contained, finally allowing himself to feel the full weight of the moment. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the vicar intoned. "You may kiss the bride." Sebastian cupped her face in his hands with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Hello, wife," he murmured, just for her. "Hello, husband," she whispered back. And then he kissed her, and Lily cheered, and Lady Penworth wept happy tears, and even the Dowager Duchess was seen to dab at her eyes with a handkerchief. The wedding breakfast was held in the great dining room, which had been transformed with flowers and candles into something out of a fairy tale. Toasts were made, some heartfelt, some bawdy, one from Lily that involved a lengthy digression about Bartholomew the Frog and his apparent approval of the union. Food was consumed in vast quantities. Laughter echoed off the walls that had known so much silence. And through it all, Sebastian never let go of Eliza's hand. "Are you happy?" he asked her, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows and guests began to drift toward the gardens. "Deliriously." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Though I confess I am somewhat terrified. I have no idea how to be a duchess. You have been running this household for 3 years. The title merely makes it official." "The title makes it public. That is rather different." She traced patterns on the back of his hand. "Lady Fortescue will be insufferable. The gossips will watch my every move, waiting for me to make some catastrophic error of etiquette that proves I was never worthy of the position." "Lady Fortescue can go hang." Sebastian's voice was mild, but there was steel beneath it. "And the gossips will tire of us soon enough. We are not nearly interesting enough to sustain their attention once the novelty wears off." "I beg to differ. A duke who married his niece's companion after sending her away and then chasing her across the country. Who broke up her engagement to his sworn enemy? We are the most interesting thing to happen to society in years." "Then let us give them something else to talk about." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Let us be so boringly, contentedly happy that they have no choice but to find someone else to dissect. Is that possible? Boring, contented happiness? I don't know. His smile was soft, almost wondering. I have never experienced it before, but I find myself eager to try. The first months of marriage were a revelation. Eliza had expected some adjustment, had braced herself for conflicts and compromises, and the inevitable friction of two strong-willed people learning to share a life. What she had not expected was how easy it would be. They fell into a rhythm with surprising speed. Mornings were spent together in the library, he attending to estate business while she managed household affairs, their desks arranged so they could look up and see each other whenever they wished. Afternoons were for lily lessons and walks and increasingly elaborate botanical experiments that seemed to require an ever-growing population of frogs. Evenings were for each other. Sebastian, freed from the prison of his own fear, proved to be a different man entirely from the cold, distant Duke she had first met. He was playful in private, given to surprising her with stolen kisses in corridors and unexpected gifts left on her pillow. He was passionate in their bedroom, approaching their physical relationship with the same intensity he brought to everything, but tempered now with tenderness and care. He was vulnerable in ways that still surprised her, sharing fears and memories and hopes for the future, with an openness that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I dreamed about Caroline last night, he told her one morning, his voice careful. Eliza set down her teacup and gave him her full attention. Do you want to tell me about it? She was in the garden, the rose garden by the fountain. He stared into his coffee, his expression distant. She was laughing. I had almost forgotten that she used to laugh. Before the pregnancies took their toll, she was quite merry, full of life. What did she say? Nothing. She just looked at me. And then she looked at you. You were there too, suddenly, the way people are in dreams. She looked at both of us, and she smiled. He set down his cup and met Eliza's eyes. I woke up feeling as though I had been forgiven. Is that strange? No. Eliza reached across the table and took his hand. I think that's exactly what you needed to feel. They did not speak of Caroline often, but when they did, it was without the weight of guilt that had once pressed down on Sebastian. Slowly, painfully, he was learning to remember his first wife with sorrow rather than shame, to honor her memory without being imprisoned by it. She would have liked you, he said one evening, as they walked through the rose garden where he had dreamed of her. You are nothing alike, but she would have admired your strength, your refusal to be pushed around. Even by stubborn dukes, especially by stubborn dukes. He tucked her arm more firmly through his. She used to tell me I was impossible, you know, too controlling, too certain of my own rightness. She was too gentle to fight me on it, but she saw me clearly. And now? Now I have a wife who fights me constantly. He smiled down at her. It is exactly what I needed. I do not fight you constantly, only when you are being ridiculous, which is constantly, according to you. Well? She leaned into him, breathing in the scent of him, sandalwood and clean linen, and something uniquely Sebastian. Someone has to keep you humble. Spring turned to summer, and summer to autumn. Ashworth Park, which had been a house of silence and shadows, slowly transformed into something warmer and more alive. Lily flourished under the stability of a household with two parents who loved her. She still had nightmares, sometimes still woke crying for the mother and father she had lost. But the episodes grew less frequent as the months passed. She had begun to call Eliza Aunt Eliza instead of Miss Thornwood, a transition that had happened gradually and without discussion, as natural as breathing. The staff, too, seemed lighter. Mrs. Aldrich hummed as she went about her work. The footman no longer walked on eggshells, dreading the Duke's unpredictable moods. Even the ancient butler, Fredericks, had been seen to crack an actual smile on at least 2 occasions. "You have worked a miracle," Lady Penworth observed during a visit that autumn. "I would not have believed it possible if I had not seen it with my own eyes." "I have not done anything," Eliza protested. "Sebastian is the one who has changed." "Sebastian has allowed himself to change. There is a difference." The older woman squeezed her hand. "He needed someone strong enough to push through his walls, someone who would not give up on him, no matter how hard he pushed back. You gave him that." "He gave me just as much." Eliza looked across the drawing-room to where Sebastian was teaching Lily a card game, their dark heads bent together in concentration. "I spent my whole life believing I was only valuable for what I could do for my usefulness. He made me feel valued for myself. That is what love does, when it is the right love." Lady Penworth followed her gaze. "My husband used to look at me the way Sebastian looks at you, as though I were the sun, and he a planet that existed only to orbit me. It was quite overwhelming at first. One never gets entirely used to being adored." "No," Eliza agreed softly. "One doesn't." Winter came, and with it the Christmas season. Ashworth Park had never been decorated for Christmas during Sebastian's years of mourning. The house had remained dark and quiet while the rest of England celebrated, Sebastian preferring to mark the holiday with nothing more than a modest dinner and an exchange of small gifts with Lily. But this year everything was different. Eliza threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm, directing the servants in the hanging of greenery and the placement of candles until the house blazed with warmth and light. A massive tree was installed in the great hall, decorated with ribbons and gilded ornaments that Lily helped select. The kitchen worked overtime, producing mince pies and plum puddings and all manner of seasonal delicacies. And on Christmas Eve, for the first time in years, Ashworth Park opened its doors to guests. It was not a grand ball or a formal house party. Eliza had no desire to turn their celebration into a society spectacle. Instead, she invited the neighbours who had been kind to her during her years as a companion, along with a few friends from the village and the servants' families who had nowhere else to go. It was an eclectic gathering, unusual for a ducal household, and precisely what she had wanted. Sebastian surveyed the crowded drawing-room with an expression of bemused wonder. "I believe this is the most people who have been in this house at once since my father's funeral," he observed. "Is that a complaint?" "No." He pulled her close, heedless of the other guests who might be watching. "It is an observation about how thoroughly you have transformed my life. I used to dread Christmas. Now I find myself actually looking forward to it. That is because you are no longer spending it alone." "That is because I am spending it with you." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Everything is better with you." The evening passed in a whirl of music and laughter, and the kind of simple, uncomplicated joy that Eliza had almost forgotten existed. Lily charmed the company with an off-key but enthusiastic rendition of a Christmas carol. The vicar's wife got tipsy on punch and told scandalous stories about her youth. Sebastian, in a display that shocked everyone who knew his reputation, actually danced not the formal, measured steps of a society ball, but the lively country dances that Eliza had learned as a child. "You're staring," he murmured as they moved through the figures. "I am admiring. There is a difference." "And what exactly are you admiring?" "My husband." The word still gave her a thrill, even after months of marriage. "Who is dancing? In public, without being forced at gunpoint?" "I am dancing because my wife wished it. That is force enough." "Such a sacrifice you make for my happiness." "The greatest sacrifice imaginable." but he was smiling as he said it, his eyes warm with love. "I would suffer far worse for you, Eliza. I would suffer anything." She believed him. That was the remarkable thing. After everything they had endured, after all his years of distance and her years of doubt, she believed him completely. He would suffer for her. He would fight for her. He would move heaven and earth to keep her safe and happy. And she would do the same for him. The new year arrived with a revelation that changed everything. Eliza had suspected for several weeks, but she had not wanted to speak until she was certain. The signs were unmistakable: the fatigue, the queasiness in the mornings, the changes in her body that she had been too nervous to acknowledge. Finally, she summoned the doctor and received the confirmation she had both hoped for and dreaded. She was pregnant. The fear came first. She knew too well what had happened to Caroline, knew the toll that pregnancy had taken on Sebastian's first wife, the guilt he still carried for his role in her death. How would he react to this news? Would it drag him back into the darkness she had worked so hard to lead him out of? She found him in the library that evening, reading by the fire while the winter wind howled outside. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting with the smile he reserved only for her. "There you are. I was about to send a search party. Lily insists that you promised to read her a story before bed, and she is becoming increasingly vocal about the delay." "Sebastian." She crossed to him and sat on the ottoman at his feet, taking his hands in hers. "I need to tell you something." The smile faded, replaced by concern. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." She took a breath, steadying herself. "At least, I hope nothing is wrong. I hope you will see this as good news, though I know it might be difficult for you, given everything that happened before." "Eliza." His grip on her hands tightened. "You're frightening me. Whatever it is, just tell me." "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. She watched his face, searching for any sign of the fear or guilt she had dreaded, and saw, instead, something that looked very much like wonder. "Pregnant," he repeated, as though testing the word on his tongue. "Yes, the doctor confirmed it this afternoon. It's early yet, only a few months, but he says everything appears normal, healthy." She swallowed hard. "I know this must bring back painful memories. I know you must be afraid. But I want you to know that I am strong, Sebastian. I am not Caroline. I will not hide my health from you or make decisions without consulting you. We will face this together, whatever comes." He was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on their joined hands. When he finally looked up, there were tears on his cheeks. "A child," he said softly. "Our child." "Yes." He pulled her into his arms with sudden fierceness, burying his face in her hair. She could feel him trembling, not with fear, she realized, but with the overwhelming force of his emotion. "I am terrified," he admitted, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I am absolutely terrified. When you said you were pregnant, every memory I have tried to bury came rushing back. I saw Caroline's face. I heard the doctor's warnings. I felt all the guilt and grief I thought I had finally laid to rest. I'm sorry. No. Let me finish." He pulled back to look at her, his grey eyes bright with unshed tears. "All of that came rushing back. But then I looked at you, at your face, at your strength, at the woman who has already transformed my entire existence, and I thought, this is different. This is not a tragedy waiting to happen. This is a miracle." Eliza felt her own tears beginning to fall. "You truly believe that?" "I truly believe that." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. I believe that you are the strongest person I have ever known. I believe that together we can face anything, even my own fears. I believe that our child will be healthy and loved, and will grow up in a house full of light and laughter, surrounded by people who cherish them. And if something goes wrong, if the pregnancy is difficult, then we will face it together. His voice was steady now, firm with conviction. I will not make the mistakes I made with Caroline. I will not push you beyond your limits or prioritize my legacy over your health. If the doctors tell us to stop, we stop. If you are struggling, you tell me, and we figure out how to help you. No secrets, no silence, no shouldering burdens alone. That goes both ways. She covered his hands with hers. You must tell me when you are frightened. You must let me support you as you support me. This is not your burden to carry alone. I know. He smiled through his tears. I am learning. Slowly, imperfectly, but I am learning. She kissed him then, tasting salt and love and the promise of a future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing through their tears. We should tell Lily, Eliza said. She will be insufferable when she finds out she is going to have a cousin. She has been campaigning for a sibling for years. She has been campaigning for a dog. I'm not sure a baby is an acceptable substitute. Perhaps we should get her a dog as well, a consolation prize for the inevitable loss of attention. Sebastian groaned, but there was no real objection in it. You are going to fill this house with creatures, aren't you? Dogs and babies and probably a few more frogs for good measure. It is possible, she grinned at him. Does that bother you? Nothing you do could ever bother me. He pulled her close again, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. Fill the house with whatever you like. Fill it with chaos and noise and life. It has been empty for far too long. 7 years later. The gardens of Ashworth Park were in full summer bloom, roses spilling over arbours and lavender scenting the warm afternoon air. From somewhere beyond the hedge maze, children's laughter echoed the particular brand of shrieking delight that indicated either a magnificent adventure or an imminent disaster. Lady Eliza Vane, Duchess of Ashworth, set down her book and listened carefully. The shrieks sounded joyful rather than alarmed, so she allowed herself to relax back into her garden chair. The children would be fine. They were always fine, no matter how many frogs they caught, or trees they climbed, or elaborate schemes they hatched. There were 3 of them now. Charlotte, the eldest at 6½ with her father's grey eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. William, who was 4, and already showed signs of becoming just as difficult as his father. And baby Rosalind, only 18 months old and currently napping in the nursery, under the watchful eye of her nurse. The pregnancies had been uneventful, the births unremarkable, and the children themselves were thriving bundles of energy who kept the entire household on their toes. Lily was here too, though she could hardly be called a child anymore. At 15, she had blossomed into a striking young woman with her mother's blue eyes and a quiet self-possession that belied her age. She had emerged from the crucible of her early losses stronger than anyone might have expected, not unscathed, but not broken either. Next year she would make her debut in London society, and Eliza was already dreading the parade of unsuitable suitors who would come calling. "You look contemplative." Sebastian settled into the chair beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. His hair was more silver now than dark, and fine lines had appeared around his eyes and mouth, the marks of years spent laughing rather than frowning. He looked, Eliza thought, like a man who had finally made peace with himself. "I am contemplating how quickly time passes." She laced her fingers through his. "Charlotte informed me this morning that she is practically grown up and should be allowed to stay up past her bedtime. William has announced his intention to become a pirate, and Lily has been receiving letters from a young man in London that she thinks I don't know about." "What young man?" "I'll have him investigated immediately." "You will do nothing of the kind." But Eliza was smiling. "He is the youngest son of Viscount Hartley, perfectly respectable, excellent family, no known scandals. Lily has shown me the letters herself. They are painfully proper and remarkably dull. That's almost worse. She deserves someone interesting. She deserves someone who makes her happy. Whether he is interesting is rather beside the point." She squeezed his hand. "Speaking of interesting young men, did you see the card that arrived this morning? Marcus Blackwood is engaged." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "I had heard rumours. Who is the unfortunate woman?" "A widow from Northumberland, apparently, with 3 children and a modest fortune. According to Lady Penworth's letter, he is completely besotted, follows her around like a puppy, and has given up all his more questionable pursuits in favour of reading bedtime stories and learning to play whist." "Blackwood? Besotted?" Sebastian laughed, a genuine sound of delighted incredulity. "I would not have believed it possible." "Neither would I, a few years ago. But people change." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Even the most unlikely people can change, given sufficient motivation." "Are you speaking from personal experience, Your Grace?" "I am speaking from close observation of my husband." She tilted her face up to look at him. "Who was once the most impossible man in England and is now merely the most stubborn." "An improvement, surely." "A marked improvement." She kissed his cheek. "I am quite proud of you." Before he could respond, the garden gate burst open and a tide of children poured through. Charlotte was in the lead, her dress grass-stained and her dark hair escaping its braids. William followed close behind, clutching something in his cupped hands that probably had legs and almost certainly did not belong in the house. Lily brought up the rear, looking simultaneously exasperated and amused, the expression of a young woman who had not quite decided whether she was still a child herself or the responsible adult trying to manage them. "Mamma! Papa! Look what we found!" Charlotte skidded to a stop in front of them, vibrating with excitement. "It's a hedgehog! A real live hedgehog! Can we keep him?" "Absolutely not," Sebastian said. At the same moment Eliza said, "Let me see." They exchanged glances, his exasperated, hers amused. This was a conversation they had had many times before, about many different creatures. Eliza usually won. "His name is Bartholomew," Charlotte announced, "like Lily's frog, the first one, not the second one or the third one." "The dynasty continues," Sebastian muttered. Eliza examined the hedgehog, which had curled into a defensive ball and was attempting to look inconspicuous. It was rather adorable, actually small and bristly, with bright black eyes that peered at her from between its quills. "He seems healthy," she said carefully. "But hedgehogs are wild creatures, darling. They belong in the garden, not in the house." "What if we build him a special house in the garden?" Charlotte's eyes were huge and pleading, the exact expression she had learned would soften her father's resolve. "A little hedgehog palace, with a door and everything. Then he could live here but also be free." "That seems reasonable," Lily interjected. "I could help design it. We learned about animal husbandry last year with Miss Peterson." Sebastian groaned, but there was no real resistance in it. "Fine. A hedgehog house in the garden. But if it escapes into the actual house and causes chaos, you are all responsible for catching it." "Papa, you are the best papa in the entire world." Charlotte threw her arms around his neck, hedgehog temporarily forgotten. William seized the opportunity to show off his own prize, which turned out to be a spectacularly ugly beetle, while Lily settled into a chair and began sketching plans for the hedgehog palace. Eliza watched her family with a heart so full it almost hurt. This was what she had wanted, what she had barely dared to dream of during those dark days when she thought she would never be allowed to have it. A house full of chaos and noise and love. A husband who looked at her as though she were the center of his universe. Children who drove her mad and filled her with joy in equal measure. A life that was rich and complicated and utterly, perfectly her own. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked quietly, beneath the noise of the children's chatter. "I am thinking that I am happy." She smiled at him. Ridiculously, absurdly, almost painfully happy. "Good." He kissed her temple. "That makes two of us." Charlotte was explaining to William why beetles were not as good as hedgehogs. William was defending his beetle with passionate intensity. Lily was mediating with the weary patience of someone who had been settling sibling disputes for years. Through the garden gate, Eliza could hear the baby beginning to wake from her nap, her cries carrying through the open nursery window. She should go inside. There were household matters to attend to, a menu to approve, correspondence to answer. The work was never really done, no matter how much help she had. But for this moment, she stayed where she was surrounded by the people she loved, in the home she had made, living the life she had fought so hard to build. The Earl's daughter, who had been told she was only good for what she could do. The companion who had loved a duke and been sent away for it. The woman who had refused to give up on herself or the people who mattered to her. She had been useful once. Now she was cherished. It was, she thought, the happiest ending she could have imagined. Sebastian's hand found hers again, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. He did not speak. He did not need to. After 7 years of marriage, they had learned to communicate in silences as eloquently as in words. The afternoon sun slanted through the garden, turning everything golden. The children's laughter rose and fell like music, and Eliza Vane, Duchess of Ashworth, closed her eyes and let herself simply be present, loved, and finally, completely at peace.